All right, let's get straight to it. We're looking at two key players in the AI networking world today. Arista Networks, ANET, and Astera Labs, A-Lab.
Exactly. We've got their Q1 2025 earnings reports, analyst notes, basically the fresh data.
And the goal is to pull out the really important stuff, right? What you need to know about where AI infrastructure is heading without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Precisely. Think of it as the highlights reel for understanding these AI network builders.
Okay, so let's kick off with Arista, ANET. Headline numbers.
Pretty strong. Revenue hit $2.005 billion. That's up 27.6% from last year.
$2 billion, wow. And margins?
Gross margin came in at 64.1%, which was actually a bit better than people expected. And earnings per share, 65, also a beat.
Solid performance. But what did the analysts immediately jump on?
Well, two things mainly. Tariffs and the outlook for the second half of the year.
Ah, tariffs. Always a factor.
Yep. Management kept their full-year guidance, but they did flag a potential hit to gross margin from tariffs, maybe 100 to 150 basis points.
So like 1 to 1.5% potentially shaved off the margin.
Exactly. And that led them to forecast a sort of flat second half compared to the first half.
Which analysts probably interpreted in different ways.
For sure. Some saw it as, typical management conservatism, underpromise, overdeliver sort of thing.
But others might have worried it signals growth peaking.
That was the other side, yeah. Is the really explosive growth starting to level off? That was the question floating around.
Okay, interesting dynamic there. Now let's switch over to Astera Labs, ALA. What did their Q1 look like?
Also very strong, maybe even more eye-catching in terms of growth. Revenue was $159.4 million.
How does that compare?
That's up 13% just from the previous quarter, and get this, up 144% compared to the same quarter last year.
Whoa, 144% year over year? That's huge. What's driving that?
Primarily their Aries retimers and the Taurus Ethernet products. Those seem to be hitting a sweet spot.
And then their margins and earnings.
Also impressive. Gross margin at 74.9%. It's very healthy. And EPS was another beat against expectations.
Right. So, for Astera, what were the key analyst discussion points?
It was more about their specific role in the AI build-out. Things like how much are their products being attached to NVIDIA's new Blackwell GPUs.
Right, the attach rate.
Exactly. And how fast is their new Scorpio product ramping up? And generally, how much of Astera's silicon content is ending up per GPU in these systems.
Makes sense. Did their guidance offer any clues?
Yeah, their Q2 guidance actually came in above what most analysts were expecting. Midpoint of about $172.5 million.
So continued strong growth expected. Any caveats, though?
There were some murmurs, yeah. Concerns about potential GPU export restrictions hitting demand, and maybe some risk from delays in NVIDIA getting its full server rack shipped out.
Okay, so both companies clearly riding the AI wave, but facing slightly different questions. Arista on sustaining growth against headwinds, Astera on executing amidst this massive ramp in ecosystem shifts.
That sums it up pretty well. Different stages, different scrutiny.
Let's dig a bit deeper now. Arista hitting that $2 billion quarter you mentioned, it was their first time.
Yes, and what's really striking is the speed. They went from $1 billion in quarterly revenue to $2 billion in just 11 quarters. That's less than 3 years.
That really speaks volumes about the scale and speed of spending in the hyperscale market, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The demand for network capacity is just exploding.
Yeah.
And another indicator for Arista, their deferred revenue popped up again.
Deferred revenue. Remind us what that signifies.
It's basically money received for products or services to be delivered in the future. So it reflects customer commitments and the health of their order backlog. It went up to $3.1 billion from $2.79 billion.
So a strong pipeline of future business already locked in.
Exactly. It suggests demand remains pretty robust.
And on the specific AI side, Arista had that target for back-end AI networking revenue.
Right. They reiterated the $750 million target for the year. And they gave some interesting color on actual projects.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
They mentioned 4 significant AI trials are moving forward. And at least 2 of those are aiming for really large-scale deployments, think 50,000 to 100,000 GPUs each by the end of this year.
Wow. Okay, so these aren't just theoretical wins. These are massive, concrete build-outs happening now.
Precisely. It shows they're deeply involved in building these next-gen AI factories. Now, shifting to Astera Labs.
What's the deeper strategic play there?
Their focus is really sharpening on what they call rack-scale AI interconnects. They're positioning their new Scorpio X switches as anchor sockets within AI clusters.
Anchor sockets. Sounds important. What does that mean in practice?
Think of it as the central nervous system, or maybe the main communication hub, inside a rack full of AI processors. All the GPUs need to talk to each other and to the network, and the Scorpio switch sits right in the middle, managing that high-speed traffic.
So becoming indispensable right at the core of the rack.
That's the idea. If you're the anchor socket, you're pretty critical and sticky.
Makes sense. And you mentioned Blackwell earlier. Astera had some news on that front, too.
Big news, yeah. They announced they've achieved full PCIe Gen 6 interoperability with NVIDIA's Blackwell.
PCIe Gen 6, that's the latest, fastest connection standard, right?
Exactly. It's crucial for feeding these incredibly data-hungry AI chips. Being fully compatible and ready to go with Blackwell right out of the gate is a significant advantage for Astra. It makes them a key enabler for anyone building with NVIDIA's newest tech.
So different strategies emerging. Arista leveraging its scale for these huge back-end networks. Astra embedding itself deep inside the AI compute rack itself.
You got it. Now let's talk about the stories, the narratives around these companies versus the numbers.
Okay. For Arista, the story has been all about Ethernet winning in AI. Does this quarter back that up?
Largely, yes. The deferred revenue, the backlog, the spending we see from hyperscalers like Meta, it all points to Ethernet adoption being very real and Arista benefiting.
There's always a but.
Well, just that slightly cautious second-half outlook we mentioned, it puts a little question mark next to the previously uncomplicated growth story.
And then there's valuation. Arista's PE ratio.
Running around 31 times earnings. Which, for a networking company, even one with AI exposure, is pretty rich.
Yeah, that's not cheap. It suggests the market is pricing in a lot of that AI growth already. Leaves less room for error.
Exactly. Any slowdown could hit the stock hard. Now, Astera Labs. The narrative there is pure, unadulterated growth.
That 144% year-over-year jump certainly screams growth.
It's phenomenal. Fastest among pretty much any comparable company right now.
But the valuation there is
Right.
something else entirely, right?
Oh, yeah. Their forward PE ratio is, let me check. Yeah, around 309 times.
309, okay. That definitely gets your attention.
Right. I mean, even the most optimistic view has to acknowledge that's pricing in, well, perfection and years of continued hypergrowth.
So far, though, they've delivered that perfection.
To their credit, yes.
Yeah.
Execution has been flawless. They keep hitting the high notes, which keeps that narrative alive.
Yeah,
But the pressure to keep delivering is immense at that valuation.
absolutely. Okay, how about the competitive playing field? Arista is going head-to-head with NVIDIA, offering Ethernet versus InfiniBand.
Yep, that's a key battleground. Arista's pushing hard with its 800 gig Ethernet tech, arguing it's a viable, more open alternative to NVIDIA's proprietary InfiniBand for connecting those massive GPU clusters.
And they seem to be getting traction there.
It looks like it, yeah. Those big AI deals we mentioned suggest customers are buying into the Ethernet story for AI backends.
Are there other competitive threats for Arista? Maybe from lower-cost hardware?
That's the white box threat, generic hardware. If the big cloud guys decide they want to save costs and use more basic unbranded switches, that could definitely put pressure on Arista's pricing and margins down the line.
Always a risk when dealing with massive customers. Now, Astera Labs, you said they have a bit of a unique position.
For some of their specific rack-level interconnect IP, yes. They don't have a ton of direct head-on competitors right now for those exact solutions.
That sounds like a good place to be.
It is, but there's a potential risk looming.
Which is,
The big guys, like NVIDIA or Broadcom, could decide to bundle more of that interconnect functionality directly onto their own chips or platforms.
so integrate it vertically and squeeze out the specialist.
Potentially, yes. If NVIDIA starts including more advanced retimer or switching tech right on their GPU boards or network cards, it could reduce the need for separate chips from someone like Astra.
That would definitely change the game.
For sure.
Yeah.
But for now, Astra has secured some key design wins. They mentioned significant traction with hyperscalers like Amazon for end-to-end AI rack designs, which gives them a strong foothold currently.
Okay, brings us to the bottom line for someone looking at these stocks. Investment thoughts on Arista.
Looking out, say, 1 to 3 years, the picture looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Margin strength, those AI wins, the deferred revenue.
Yeah.
It supports a BUY case, I think.
But near term?
Near term, maybe more caution. That tariff uncertainty and the high valuation could cause some bumps. So maybe more of a hold for the next few months until things get clearer.
Okay, long-term positive, short-term watchful, waiting for ANET. What about ALAB?
Astera Labs. It's definitely what you'd call a high beta BUY.
Meaning higher risk, higher potential reward.
Exactly. That valuation is impossible to ignore. The risk's obvious, but the potential from The Scorpio ramp, their lead in PCIe 6, the Blackwell integration. It's a powerful combination.
So you're betting on them being essential plumbing for the AI build-out.
Essentially, yes. It's an investment in a critical niche that's growing incredibly fast, but it requires a higher risk tolerance, no doubt about it.
So wrapping up, it sounds like both are plugged into the AI megatrend, but offer really different ways to play it. Arista, the established giant navigating growth and margins. Astera, the high flyer innovator in a critical component space.
That's a good summary. Different risk profiles, different points in their journey, but both benefiting immensely from AI investment.
And it underlines how dynamic this whole AI networking space is. You really have to keep watching these guys closely.
Absolutely. Things change fast.
Okay, so final thought for everyone listening to chew on. Given these very different valuations and the competitive pressures we talked about, Arista versus NVIDIA and white boxes, Astera versus potential bundling, how do you see the balance of power shifting? Will the established players maintain dominance, or can these focused specialists like Astera carve out lasting, defensible niches in the AI infrastructure market over the next few years?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Definitely something to think about as this all unfolds.